How good is AMD Ryzen for gaming, streaming, and pretty much everything else? Because although it is a little bit hard to find at the moment, it can be picked up for a little over 100 USD on the used market right now. So if you're interested in how well it performs at 1080p when paired with a mid to high-end level graphics card, be sure to stick around because today we are throwing together an X470 test bed to take a comprehensive look at the 6-core budget king just to find out. Let's jump into it. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to learn more about building PCs and other gaming related stuff, consider clicking the subscribe button, notification bell to catch all new uploads like this one the moment they drop. Doing this helps me grow here on YouTube and as a content creator, and for that I appreciate you all to the moon and back. What's happening YouTube and the internet? Terrence here, and we are back inside the lab and once again taking a comprehensive look at the Ryzen 5 1600X with its 6 cores and 12 efficient threads, 3.6 GHz base clock and 4 GHz turbo on a Gigabyte X470 motherboard and 16 GB of Trident Z at 2000 MHz, and that'll all be paired with a reference GTX 1070, which will be testing games at both low and max settings. And with that aside, it's time to take the Ryzen 5 1600X out for a test spin, but first we need to throw together the X470 test setup and then fire up some games. And now I want to interlude before we start the benchmarks, and that is to say, you want to make sure you're running your memory at its rated speed. Essentially, it is a 2 to 3 step process here in the BIOS, and we are going to cover this in a separate video, so be sure to get subscribed if you're not already to catch that, because you could be leaving a lot of performance on the table. And along with overclocking, because this is an X variant, and although we're using an air cooler, the Wraith Prism, we shouldn't have any problems hitting 4 GHz on all cores. So that's something we're going to take a look at here in a moment. But first, I wanted to run our test with everything set to auto or stock for a more realistic scenario. So with that aside, let's roll the benchmarks.
The truth is, I'm not really sure what happened.
If you came to prove, there's no reason to prove. You've got yourself something funky.
Now, if you will, the performance value of first generation Ryzen. But I tell you what, it's there. Because jumping in and taking a look at the benchmarks, starting with GTA 5, which saw the Ryzen 5 put up playable frame rates at high settings, and then moving over to everyone's favorite battle arena shooter, FORTNITE, which saw averages of over 144 FPS at competitive settings, and then its direct competitor, Call of Duty WARZONE, which ran really well on this setup, putting up averages of just over 90 FPS at high settings. And then lastly, taking a look at Far Cry 5, which actually ran fairly well, putting up playable numbers and averaging over 70 FPS across the scope. And then as you can see here, the 1600X turboed all the way up to 3.7 gigahertz on its own, which first generation Ryzen pretty much capped out at 4000 megahertz across the entire stack, so overclock it could only get you so far. Which, speaking of, I was able to dial in an overclock of 4 gigahertz on all 6 cores in 12 threads at 1.45 voltage. I did try 4.1, but no dice. Again, this is first generation Ryzen we're working with here, but one setting you could change, and this would give you the biggest boost in performance, and that would be enabling the memory XMP, which saw our 16 gigabyte kit of Trident Z load an XMP profile of 3000 megahertz stable at stock voltage and auto timings. With enabling the XMP and applying a 4 gigahertz overclock to our Ryzen 5 1600X, it did increase performance in games like GTA 5 by 5 to 10% on average, and then Far Cry 5, which too benefited from the overclock, with the performance uplift of up to 5% depending on the settings. The overclock also helped us gain 200 points in Cinebench R20 versus stock, and reached a max temperature of around 59 degrees C on our Wraith Prism, which, on a side note, isn't the same one that comes with the 1600X. That cooler is the much less fancy but just as efficient Wraith Stealth. Now, we are going to be doing a follow-up video on the subject of DDR4 speeds, but the memory controllers on Ryzen CPUs benefit heavily from fast RAM, and so I recommend that you check your motherboard's QVL to ensure you get a memory kit that is best optimized for your specific motherboard. And now, AMD recently announced in a blog post that moving forward, Ryzen 4000 or Zen 3 CPUs will be supported on the X470 and B450 chipsets, so that'll leave us with plenty of options at the bargain level between OG Zen, Zen Plus, and even Zen 2. And when you pair this combination with a mid to high end graphics card like the 1660 Ti or an RTX 2060 Super, if you want something newer, this setup will run perfectly fine and you'll be undoubtedly getting your money's worth. But you figure with a budget of $300 to $350 USD, you can jump on the AM4 platform and build yourself a system that can game at 1080p or 1440p at mid to high settings. So to learn more about building gaming PCs and other tech-related stuff, jump to the 2 playlists to the left of your screen. Consider clicking the subscribe icon down at the bottom and you'll be ahead of the game. And with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and go. Thanks for giving this one a watch. I hope to catch you all on the next one, so until then, be easy.